Good morning, folks. I'm Ed Overstreet, and welcome to the Night Sky Imaging YouTube channel. We are finally going to finish the processing of NGC 7822. We're going to finish it with an adventure into Photoshop, which may I think is going to probably be unnecessary, but we're going to do it anyway. So this processing series that includes so far 21 parts is about to end with part 22. And I know we're glad to finish this up. So without further ado, let's head over to Pixinsight, and we're going to open it up and get started. And the next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to go to our file. We're going to load project, and we're going to find NGs. We took this back in October, and we're just now finishing it. So let's click on this project and open it. Okay, it took a minute to get this loaded. I'll put you on pause while that happened. So let's open up our image and see our work in process. If you're just if you're looking at this video and haven't seen any of the other prior 21 videos that led us to this point, I saved every process after having completed it, so that I do that regardless of whether I am making a video or not. I save the project, and every step along the way is saved. So as I make a change, I note the change in the title, and then I make a copy, and I save that in the order that they were performed. So at any point in time, I can go back to a stage and pick up from there. I do this for several reasons, but the primary reason is the evolving improvements in Pixinsight. They come out with new techniques, new processes, and sometimes I like to go back to images that I worked on in the past, and I can try that process and pick up at a point where that process might be applied without having to start at the very beginning. So that's one of the main reasons. And I probably am overkilling this, but that's kind of how I order things. So at any rate, we're at part 22, and that involves the use of another software program called Photoshop. I'm sure everybody's aware of Photoshop, but I'm not sure everybody that's going to be watching this is going to have an understanding of it, and many of the people who may watch this may not own it at all and have no intention of buying it. So there's no reason really if you own Pixinsight, you should be able to do essentially everything you need to do in Pixinsight. But my comfort level with Photoshop is extremely high. I am a photographer for the past 15 years, and I use Photoshop daily, so I feel more comfortable with it actually than I do Pixinsight. So I do a lot of my final tweaks in Photoshop because I'm familiar with it, and that's where we're headed right now. Before we make that trip, I want to make an aside. After having gone through everything so far, I'm not entirely sure there needs to be anything else done. And were it not for this video and my plan to include how I use Photoshop in the final tweaks, I probably would just end it right here and put this up on Astrabin and on my Facebook page and Instagram and let it be that. But I did decide to go ahead and show you the tools I use in Photoshop. I'm more than likely going to screw it up, but the image is fine right now. There's not a whole lot I'll be able to do to improve it. I like the nebulosity in the surrounding edges. I like the detail. I like the stars. They're as good as they're going to be, giving I'm not running a flat field optical, so I have to pretty much get what I get. And so let's head over into Photoshop and let's go open it up. It'll take it a second. I have a subscription plan where for $10 a month, I think it's what it is, $9.99, you get Photoshop and Lightroom. And I am a big fan of both. Okay, we have Photoshop opened up. Let's go back to Pixinsight, and we're going to save this image. Save image as. Let's go back to Astro Drive, year 2021, October 7822, and let's create a folder called PS for Photoshop, and let's shorten this name, and we're just going to call it NGC 7822, and we're going to save this as a TIFF file. And because we're going to be using some plugins that will not work in 32-bit, I'm going to save it as a, or in 16-bit, I'm going to save it as a 8-bit file. And so we can head over to Photoshop and open the file. We want to go to 2021, October 7822, Photoshop, and the file. Okay, as I mentioned, there's not a whole lot that there's just not a whole lot that I would probably do to this image, but I'm going to show you several plugins that I use. One involves applying more noise reduction. The other involves color mask and enhancing the colors, the detail, and the structure. And one of the advantages of Photoshop is the ease by which you can brush or paint in those different changes that you've made where they need to be added. And I'll show you what I mean. Making sure, though, before we get started, that you're familiar with, over here on the far left, Photoshop puts its toolbars, and we'll be using this tool right here. It looks like a band-aid. We'll click the little arrow in the lower right-hand corner, and well, it should open up when you know it. Let's try this one. Well, none of them are going to open up. Something is crazy with Photoshop. there we go. It opens up this box, and we're going to pick the spot healing brush and use that. I think that's probably the only tool that I'm going to be using in my the changes I'll plan to make on this side. You also need to be familiar over here on the right with the layers panel and the channels. We won't be using the channels, but it is here that you can map your HA, your S2, and your O3. That'll be another tutorial. But let's go to our layers. And the first thing that I like to do is I like to make a duplicate layer, and that is Command or Control J, Command J on a Mac, and I create this duplicate layer. It's exactly the same layer, I just made a copy. And I'm going to work on this copy, because if I don't like it at all, I can delete it. If I like some of it, I can create a mask and just paint in the parts that I like, and or I can dial down the opacity, and it will reduce the global effect on the entire image. So I have several options. I could also create a smart object, but in the name of keeping this simple, I'm going to just create this duplicate layer. And I want to make you aware of down here at the very bottom of the layers panel, there are a series of icons, and this center series with a circle is where I can make an adjustment layer. So let's do that now. Let's click on that, and here are my options. I can create every available adjustment to this image I would like to create. Let's click on curves, and it opens up the curves box. But what it does is it makes a duplicate layer, and this is the curves layer, and it also creates a mask for you. You don't have to do that. So for example, if I wanted to make a darken the darks and brighten the brights, I could let's say create an anchor point here and an anchor point here, and I could drag this down and darken the darks, and I could kind of leave this alone or drag this up, and I could brighten the brights. Well, I don't like this and you don't like this, but I'm showing you the effect of, let's say, applying a curves in an adjustment layer. So one of the things we could do, if we wanted to lower it, we could grab the opacity layer here and just start dragging it, and we could just lower it back to 0 and we're back where we are. Or I could bring it back and have part of it, or I could bring it, any part of it, or bring it back to 100%. So I could globally affect this image by just using the opacity feature on this particular layer. Another thing I could do, let's just say I like the effect in the corners, but I don't like what it's doing to my nebula. So what I would probably do is choose to invert this mask. So I'm going to change this to a black mask, and I'm going to conceal these changes that I made by using this mask. And to do that, I'm going to hold down the Command on a Mac or Control on a Windows and set the I key for invert. So I am now concealing, or I'm shielding, my image that's underneath here from these curve changes that I made up here. Now, I did say that I wanted to apply the darkness element to the corners, so I could go over here and grab my paintbrush and let's select one, and let's increase the size of the paintbrush some, and that'll work. And we're going to paint on this layer right here, and I'm going to also use my bracket key, and let me put the, here is the my cursor. Let me there, you can see it now. It's in the center of the screen. I'm going to take my right bracket key, and I'm going to click it to make the brush bigger. And now I'm going to paint in the darkness where I want it. And so I'm using this mask, and you can see where I've revealed by bringing the white, painting with a white brush. And if you want to, let's say you don't like it and you want it back to where it was in, let's say, this corner, then you can click here and paint with your black brush and paint over it. It brings it back to where it was. So in this corner here, you can see you're concealing again the effects of curves from this lower layer. Now I'll tell you what, let's add another adjustment layer. So I'm going to go down here to this center, the one in the center again, and I'm going to go up to hue saturation. So I've added another layer on top, and if you look up here, I have my options to change the saturation of the image, the hue, and the lightness and or the brightness component, although this does not really affect brightness in a way that you might think. So, but let's take saturation and let's run it up some. And again, I don't like it at all, but we're doing this to show you the effect of being able to do it. Let's also just change the hue some. And so we've done so. Let's bring the saturation down a little bit. All right. So we think we might like it, so we keep this. And after paying attention to it for a while, we think, you know what? I don't like it as much as I thought. I don't like it in the blues. I just like it here. So what you can do if you just like it in one part, rather than invert the whole image, just make sure you're painting with a black brush, and make sure you got your brush, and then you can go over here and take this part of the image and return it to the color it was, and say this color, and now you got your blue standing out. So you can paint in your saturation, or you can let me go back here, get my brush again. Let's well, I didn't get the brush. Now we got the brush. I can paint now with white, and I can go back and return this to the oversaturated look. I have a little piece up here that I haven't painted in. I think I got it all now. I'm looking at this mask to make sure. Okay. Now we're back to where we started from, but I could take the global effect and put my cursor right underneath this 100 until I see a hand. And when I see the hand, then I can hold my mouse and drag this down. And so I've reduced the saturation by down to 41%. So it's saturated, but not as much as it once was. So this is a way that you can use adjustment layers to work your magic using any of the following adjustments. And Photoshop is very powerful in the way it uses layers. Once you're done, if you like it, you go up to Layer, and you go down to flatten layer, and it will flatten all of these layers. So we now have a very savable, manageable file. It's still, if you go down here and look, it's 174 megabytes. So it's a large file, even though 8-bit, but it's manageable. And so we're going to zoom into this by holding down the Command, Control, and the plus key. And we're going to look at some of the issues that this mask has, or this image has. And I'm thinking to myself, look at all of these yellow stars. What in the world have I done? Well, it's the effect of this nebulosity coloration that's affected these stars. I doubt very seriously they're this color, or that they're this color as a result of reflecting this nebula. So what can I do? Well, I probably would take this image back into Photoshop. Back into Pixinsight. But rather than do that, let's go back into Pixinsight and let's make another decision. One, let's close this out without saving it. Let's return to Pixinsight and let's separate the stars from the nebula and into two images, and then we can save the stars as an image and work on them independently, and we can save the nebula as an image and work on the nebula independently in Photoshop. And the way I'm going to do that is go to Process, All Processes, and I'm going to go down to Starnet, which is right here. I'm going to click on that, and I also have Starnet loaded as a process instance process right over here towards the bottom, because I use it in every case. I use it to create, if nothing more, a star mask and a nebula mask. So we're going to drag this over onto our image and let it work its magic. Well, I paused the video because it took a few minutes to do that. Keeping in mind this is a large drizzled file and it just takes longer. And I went ahead and renamed this the nebula, and find the stars, and I renamed my stars instead of star mask, which was the name it was given, I named it just stars. So here are my stars, and they look different. In fact, they don't look like they even fit this image, but trust me, in this, when we're finished, it'll all work out, because again, the magic of Photoshop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this image and I'm going to save it as a TIFF file, and we're going to save it in this PS directory as an 8-bit image. And then we're going to take this image and we're going to save it as well in the same directory. It's going to go right back to it also as an 8-bit image. Now I could have saved as a 16-bit if the only thing I intended to do was to use curves or levels, but if I'm going to use some plugins, I know the plugins do not work well with the 16-bit images, so I just go ahead and convert to 32 bits. So now let's head back into Photoshop and let's pull up those two images. Let's go to Stars, and our nebula image and open. Okay, so here's our nebula, and as you can see, Starnet did a real good job of removing stars, but there's one here, there's one here, there's one here, 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 here. They're all over the place. Now, when I first did this, I thought I'm just going to go ahead and bring up my spot healing brush, and I'm just going to clone them out. Just click on them and clone them out. But I realized the stars aren't removed here because they're not here. So they're going to be one place or the other. So I want to undo this. I'm going to go to Edit and undo the spot healing brush. The star's still here because it was never removed, so you don't see it here, and you only see partial parts of the star removed over here. So we don't want to remove those. We can work on this nebula without having done so. So what we want to do is let's go to our stars first and fix those. It's a very simple process. Just go up to Image, Mode, and come down to not Mode, Adjustments, Mode, Auto Color, and we have adjusted the color correctly. For the most part, I'm seeing some issues here, but it's because the other part of the star is over here. So once those two are remarried, these colors that are partial will balance out with the nebula star remnants. So we're okay with this right now. I doubt I'll do anything else. I'm going to go ahead and save this as stars. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to go back into Image, Mode, and I'm going to convert back to a 16-bit image, and I'm going to save it now. And click on Stars, Save, Replace. Okay. Now we're not going to close it out because I'm going to show you a way that you can combine your stars back with your nebula in Photoshop, or you can save the two files independently back into Pixinsight, and you can combine them using Pixel Math in Pixinsight. So let's go to the nebula, and here's where we're going to do some work. I do have my spot healing brush already opened, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around this image, and I'm going to click on some of these remnants, star remnants, the real small ones, and some of the areas where I have some color noise that's almost uncontrollable, although we're still going to give that a chance to improve. And I'm going to just take a few minutes, and I'm going to make a trip around here using this tool. And now that you get the idea of what I'm doing, to clean up this part of the image, I'm going to put this on pause, finish, and I'll be back. Okay, I've made a trip around the nebula, and I guess I'm okay with it. If I were entering this in, if I was putting this on Astrobin, I'd probably spend a lot more time than I have. But to be honest with you, I wasn't unhappy with the image we finished in Pixinsight before we even opened it in Photoshop. But this is something I would do: separate the stars from the nebula, work on each one independently, and then bring them back together. This often is necessary for me when I do narrowband imaging, because my stars, it's not always easy to remove the magenta from the stars due to narrowband imaging, although I've got a pretty good script that I borrowed from John Rista on removing magenta from stars that are colored that way. Okay, now let's look at some possibilities of enhancing the color using a plugin called from Nick software called Vivasa. And this is the palette from Nick software. I think this sells for about $100. It's a plug-in for our Photoshop. You can go up to plugins and find it, or you can go over to your filter, come down and click on Nick software, and here are the options. It also creates, if you want to have this on your desktop, it creates these options for you that are readily available. At the very top is a noise reduction algorithm that works okay but not great. And on images like this, I rated a 5 on a 10-point scale. But Vivasa is a strong program, and what I want to do is I want to make a duplicate copy, which I've already should have done. And before I ever started all of this spot healing brush work, and I'm going to click on Vivasa. Vivasa creates a color mask and or a luminosity mask or a structure mask in a cool way. And so let me show you how that works. It uses control points. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go down here where it says control point and click on this icon right here. Now, above this line right here are where you can make global changes. You're going to affect the entire image. You can change the brightness of the entire image. You can change the contrast of the entire image. And you can change the saturation of the image one way or the other. And so I'm going to move these back about where they started. And so, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to affect the whole image. So what I want to do is I want to go down here to the control point, and let's say I want to bring out the blues. So I'll click on a blue area, and I may make the circle bigger, but it doesn't matter. It will only affect those pixels that this control point has landed on. And if they're all blue, it'll only affect the blue pixels. Unfortunately, you see some gold in here too, and it's possible that you're covering not just blue, but part of a gold pixel. We're going to find out. Then, rather than use these global features, you're going to scroll down here to this part, and now the changes you make will only be for this area. So rather than add blue, I'm just going to subtract warmth. And that will kind of bring in a little blue to it. And if I like that feature, I'm going to click on the Option key, and I'm going to drag this to there, and it'll make a duplicate copy with the same effect. Okay, I want to make another control point, so it's up here now. I'll click on this, and let's say I want to affect the golds. And I'm going to leave the size that way. And we need to go down here, and one of the things I want to do is add some structure to this area. So I'm going to bring this up some, and I may want to warm that up a little bit. Where else could I use structure and where warmth might help? I could drag this down here and I could put it there. So I can change the contrast, the saturation, affect different colors. I may want to darken down these corners. So I click on my control point. I go down here to a corner and I go down to my brightness and I just drag that down. And if I like it, I don't, but I could come over here and I could hit all four corners and make another copy and come over here. So if I like this effect, then I can go down here to apply, and it'll take it 1 second. Okay, it automatically applied it and took me right back into Photoshop. It even changed the name to Vivasa, so I know the tool that it used. I can turn it off. I can turn it back on. See if I like the effect. Off, on, but just clicking on this eye to the left of this layer. It's before, after. So let's just assume, though, that after looking at this for a few minutes, thought I liked it, now I don't like some parts of it, and I want to change some parts of it. Well, rather than go back into Vivasa, which I could, and make those selective changes, I'm just going to go down here and create a mask. Next to the adjustment icon, I'm going to click here, and I'm going to create a mask, and I'm going to get my black brush by going over here and clicking. I'm going to make sure I've got the brush tool selected, and I'm going to increase Command plus, and I'm going to well, I was trying to, hang on a minute, let me get rid of this. There we go. Command Control plus to bring this up, and I couldn't do both. And let's say that I want to bring back some of the color here, so I'm going to paint that back in, some of the lightness, and I want to do the same back here where I darkened these corners, and I want to do the same up here and the same over here. Now I'm going to hit Command and the minus key and lower the size of this. And let's say, well, I think what I want to do is darken it some, but not as dark as it was. So I'm going to go over here and grab the opacity slider, and I'm going to pull it down some. And by doing so, I'm going to return it a little bit back to where it was. Not that much, because we're almost all the way back to where it was. So, with that being said, let's make a decision whether we even want to keep this whole thing at all. And I'm just going to delete that layer. Delete the layer mask, and we're back to where we were. Let's just delete the whole Vivasa trip. We got a problem over here with Photoshop locking up on me. Okay, we're kind of back where we started from. We decided we didn't like our changes, so we deleted Vivasa and the changes we made. But we did remove some of the artifacts from the remnants of the stars and from the blotchiness. And let's go into Topaz and let's apply some noise reduction, and then let's add our stars back. So I wanted to show you the effects of using the NIC palette, NIC software, NIK software. And let's head over now to our filters. Let's go down to Topaz Labs, and I can either bring up the new AI program that's a DeNoise program. I have it as a standalone down here on the far right, but I'm going to use DeNoise 6, which comes as one of the, I feel like one of the better noise reduction programs available, especially for deep space images. And it's opening up. Okay, let's we have a very small box here to kind of move around and take a look at our noise, color noise, and our luminance noise. So let's just stop here for a second and let's bring up our overall strength to about 12. I hardly ever go over 15. Let's go down here to recover detail, and let's move our slider over here to where we have some detail, and let's bring that up to about 50. And let's add some grain, about 20. Let's reduce a little blur at about 20. And let's go back over here and see how that affected this. And our blues. Let's make our blue color, let's bring that up just a little bit more, maybe to 15. Okay, all right, let's apply that. Okay, it is applied the noise reduction algorithm to the image, and so I'm going to go ahead and flatten the image by clicking on layer, and I'll go down to flatten, and it'll combine these into one layer. And I'm going to go get my stars, which are right here, and I'm going to select all of them. So I just selected by building a border around this entire thing. So select all. It copies the entire, or it selects the image. Then I'm going to copy this image. I'm going to go back now and open up my nebula, and I'm going to edit, paste. So now I have a layer with my stars, and I have a layer with my nebula. So I want you to take note, we did not get rid of this star remnant. This one, this one, this one, this one, and they're not here. There's some effects, some remnants of it here. So when we combine these two, we're going to combine the two remnants together in effect, and we're going to have hopefully, we're going to find out. So the way I'm going to combine them, I'm going to go up here to the blending mode. I'm going to go, it's on normal. I'm going to select this pull down. And I'm going to go down to the screen mode. You can kind of roll down and see the effects of all of this if you want, but I'm going to go to the screen mode. Lighten or screen? What should we do? The lighten mode or the screen mode? I'm going to go to the screen mode. I'm going to select that. I'm going to flatten the image. And now my stars are all not as golden. They resume some of their natural color. We combine the remnants of the stars once separated with the stars in the nebula, and overall we have a more colorful star field on a nebula that we tweaked a bit. I can already tell you we messed up a little bit of the nebulosity by darkening, and but I doubt there's too much else that I do when I'm using Photoshop and deep space images. It's altogether different when you're photographing landscapes and people, but those are essentially the tools I use. I almost always separate the stars from the background, from the target, the nebula or the galaxy. I'll separate the stars out and save both of them, and I work on both of them independently in Photoshop. If I work on them at all, I'll use Vivasa, and in the Nix software I use these other tools, but not for deep space, just selective masking, and so that I can apply different effects from saturation, color enhancement, to structure, contrast. All can be done using control points in Vivasa. I'll go to, I often use the spot healing brush or the patch tool to affect different areas of the background when I'm working just on the nebula. I always like to have the stars removed when I do that so that I don't affect the stars. And then I almost always run a Topaz DeNoise algorithm on the entire image. I could use my star mask as a mask and only run the denoise on the background, and I usually do because I don't necessarily want, even on the remnants of the stars, to run the denoise. But if you're just running it on the nebula, your stars are going to be pretty much unaffected anyway, so I keep it separate when I run denoise. So let's well, we'll see if there's a difference. We'll go ahead and save this image, and we're going to call this, let's just call it final, and we're going to save it back to this directory. We're going to go back to Pixinsight. We can go ahead and save our star mask in our I know Photoshop, I don't need you. Okay, so let's bring up our other rendition of this, and we're going to go to October 7822, Photoshop, final, and let's bring that up. And there we go. We have we've made some enhancements to the color in the blue channel. We lost some of our nebulosity. I did that using the spot healing brush. We fixed our stars so they're not all golden, they're more their natural color. Actually, it's better. It's an improvement. Was it worth all that trip? Probably, if I'm going to put it up and show it off. So folks, I'm pretty much concluded the processing of 7822. I hope you benefit from some of the tricks that I've come up with, borrowed, stolen, and created on my own. And but I do find the need at times to use Photoshop to bail me out of processes I've applied in Pixinsight that aren't right, that don't look good, but can be improved by the use of Photoshop. Okay, well, I thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you back here where I plan to make a series of videos where I'm going to use Deep Sky Stacker to stack images. I'm going to take those TIFF files into Photoshop, and I'm going to do everything in Photoshop, nothing in Pixinsight, to process the image. Hopefully it'll turn out as well or nearly so as it would turn out in Photoshop. Have a good rest of the day. Happy New Year to everyone.